Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode 7 of the Lucha Underground Luchador Spotlight. Today's the big one for John. Today we're going to be talking about his favorite guy. I'm not even going to say his name. I'm going to give that honor to John. Go ahead.
Johnny Mundo, baby. Oh, yeah.
That, you definitely did it justice. Good job.
Sweet.
All right, so when it comes to Johnny Mundo, we know that he's obviously the biggest name in Lucha Underground history. So
Yes.
it's only fitting that he would be our lucky number 7 when it comes to the Luchador Spotlights, right?
I am so excited for this. Johnny Mundo definitely became one of the higher profile stars in Lucha Underground, one of those big guys, those legitimizers, if you will, coming in instantly with that credibility. And, with that thought in mind, it's going to be very interesting to book his second season, particularly Ultima Lucha 2. I can't wait to get into it.
Yeah, well, I mean, let's get right into what he did in season 1. He main evented the first show of Lucha Underground. The first ever episode of Lucha Underground was main evented by him and Prince Puma. So I definitely think that is noteworthy. As far as actual storylines go, he really did kind of start the season versus Big Rick. That was really his first big feud, right, John?
Yeah, Big Rick, and in a larger context, Dario Cueto.
Right.
They had their beef early in the season, so yes, absolutely.
Yeah, and then I kind of want to say he had almost like a little mini program with Cage, right?
I think a little bit, yeah, a little bit of a back and forth because Cage was trying to get to Puma,
Right.
and yet Mundo was always kind of like that fixture in the title picture. So yeah, they had a little bit of a skirmish too.
Yeah, and the Cage feud, or a little mini feud, I guess you could say, series of matches, led to King Cuerno targeting Johnny Mundo.
Yes, and that was I think the next somewhat big program there for Mundo in season one.
Yeah.
King Cuerno targets Mundo, takes the leg out, and Mundo's just been labeled as the new prey for King Cuerno.
And that entire feud lasted a few weeks. I thought that the blow off was incredible. It was probably the most satisfying Cage match I've ever seen. Because it was one of those things where you got the baby face getting in there and taking it to the heel. The heel looks like he's going to win, but the baby face hits a couple of big moves, and then they look like they're going to escape. They decide to forego the easy way out. He hits the big end of the world off the top of the cage, connects with it, and gets the pin off of it. And it's just so satisfying to me. I love it.
It's such a satisfying payoff to your point. I think it's incredible imagery. Seeing him connect with the move full on King Cuerno like that and get the pinfall victory. Everything about that cage match was superb. You're talking about two of the best workers, in my opinion, in the company coming together. So yeah, it was amazing stuff.
Absolutely. After that, though, we got, things got a little bit more interesting because after the Cuerno feud, we had some interference, I suppose you could say, with Alberto Del Rio or Alberto El Patron or whatever you want to call him. He had a match with Alberto where the winner would face Hernandez for the number one contendership and for the right to face Puma, who had the title at the time. And he lost to Alberto, but then in Alberto's match with Hernandez, we got a little bit of character progression, right, John?
Yes, because this was the heel turn I've waited, I believe, 7 years for. It was a long, long time coming. And yeah, he just puts Patron through a glass window, busts Patron open, gets him back in the ring, and watches Hernandez gets the winning pinfall to, keep his number one contendership status.
Yeah. And we did briefly just kind of skip over the fact that he did participate in the trios tournament, but he lost his first match. He was teaming with Puma and Hernandez, and they lost their first match thanks to Hernandez.
Right, exactly.
Scumbag that he is.
Yeah, Hernandez, way to drop the ball.
So once Mundo turned heel, things really started to pick up for him because now he's showing this new aggressive, violent side, and Cueto is now a fan. So Cueto takes it upon himself to give Johnny Mundo an Iron Man match for the world title against Prince Puma. One night, one match. They called it all night long.
Oh, and how good was this? I mean, I'll still, even though it's so old at this point, I'll still plug the live reactions we did to that episode because I thoroughly enjoyed it. Guys, it was amazing. I mean, we even talked through commercial breaks, which I think was one of the first instances we ever really did that.
Yep.
Because that's just how into the match we were. Yeah, it was a fantastic match again. Two amazing guys. One of the really defining feuds of season one, I think. Johnny Mundo and Prince Puma.
Yeah.
And yeah, just amazing,
Because
amazing
even though
stuff.
both guys had separate feuds throughout most of the season, they always came back to each other.
Exactly. They had that kind of competitive bond, if you will,
Yeah.
of just both being so exceptional, but who really was the better man. And, you do have Puma get the victory on this day, but man, I mean, amazing heel work from Mundo, a great comeback from Puma. Like, this Iron Man match just had all the necessary elements to be great, and boy, was it ever.
It was. But then I think that was episode 32, so we only really had 5 more episodes after that, and it pretty much just consisted of Mundo and El Patron talking smack to each other, right? And I know we had the big Atomicos match, Team Mundo versus Team Patron. I do believe Team Mundo won that match too.
Yeah, yeah. Team Mundo won that match after Mundo got the winning pin on Sexy Star because he's a visionary and the captain of that team. And yeah, then after that was just Ultima Lucha, and you guys know how that's shook out. Mundo getting the win in his very first Ultima Lucha, the new
The big
streak,
win, baby.
the big win, baby. Got the monkey off my back, and we've established the new streak, 1-0. So there you go. Yeah, great stuff.
Absolutely. And Melina back.
Yes, yes, Molina making a shocking return. I mean, it's still up in the air. Was it a one-off? Is there going to be something more? I mean, that's kind of the question that looms. I could go with either scenario and be happy with it. I feel like Mundo has really grown so comfortable and so natural in this Rudo role that Molina neither really adds or detracts anything from it, in my view. So I don't really see a big stake for me personally with her presence or lack thereof. But I was just really glad to see him do some amazing heel work at Ultima Lucha and beat Patron, especially knowing now what we know where Patron stood with Lucha Underground. So
Absolutely. All right. Well, now we covered season 1. Let's talk about season 2. John, I know for a fact that you already have a plan for Mundo, so I want you to save that for last. As far as what I would do with Mundo in season 2, he's a heel, so immediately I'm thinking as soon as King Cuerno gets done with Phoenix, I don't think Cuerno's going to win the Gift of the Gods title. Mundo targets Phoenix.
I like that. Yeah, absolutely. I think that'd be a great idea. That match would be amazing. Are you kidding me? For all those
Right.
marbles?
Yeah.
Certainly.
So that's a big one. And then the other big one that I really want to see Mundo do some work with guys that aren't necessarily in the title picture, but are just phenomenal workers. Like, I want to see him put on matches, even if there's not necessarily a feud. I want to see matches between him and Havoc, him and Angelico, him and Jack Evans, him and Pentagon. I want to see Mundo basically playing that mechanic role. I want him to work everybody and put on great matches with everybody. So that's my goal for him. As far as Ultima Lucha goes, I would put him either in the Gift of the Gods championship match, if there is one at Ultima Lucha, or if there's another Aztec medallion issue where there's a 7-way to unify the medallions, he would be in that.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Obviously, I'm going to sign on board with that if it's a scenario where it gets him closer to the world title, my fanboying and everything.
Now,
But
I'm thinking that my ideas for him are probably way just selling him short compared to what you want him to do. So I want to know, John, what do you see or want Johnny Mundo to be doing in season 2?
I'm going to try and keep this succinct, but I am going to need to expound upon some points so I think everybody can see the story that I've envisioned for Mundo here. Um, because I love him as a Rudo. And I think he's at the point in his career. I mean, we heard on the Stone Cold podcast, he's been doing this for 10 years. I think that is a great place for him to be as a heel because he can have that chip on his shoulder like, I'm an established veteran. And so I would keep him as a Rudo throughout season 2. I would have him, I like your idea of him facing Phoenix at some point in the season. I definitely would want to get him in that hunt. Maybe have him face some other guys, maybe Havoc or whatever. But on the other side, I want to start building Angelico. We have them lose their trios rematch to the Disciples of Death, and then Angelico, he wins some, he loses some, but he's always consistently amazing. You know how Angelico is in the ring. He's going to continue to make people, their jaws drop, this and that. I would set up an altercation between him and Mundo at one point, where Mundo just kind of grunts, and Angelico kind of laughs at him and says, you're a joke. I mean, you do all this diving stuff. I was doing all that stuff and then some before anybody even knew who Angelico was. And let me tell you something, kid. All it ever got me was a neck injury and some internet dirt writers telling me that I was always this close, but didn't have all the pieces together. So what do you think you're going to get out of it? And then Angelico could just be like, because he is cocky, he could be like, well, I know I'll certainly got farther than you ever get, or I'll get farther than you ever got. Blah. And, that's the whole thing. I want Mundo to be envious of the fact that Angelico is doing all the stuff that he used to do, and yet he's breaking the ceiling that he could never break, really getting into that main event spot, really getting to be that guy. Because I think people will gravitate to Angelico like crazy when we really push him as a single star. And ultimately, I would have it end in a matchup between Angelico and Mundo at Ultima Lucha, where I would have Angelico go over. Because I feel like Mundo's true value, as much as I would love to see him win the world title and be the guy and be in the main event, I think his value at this stage of his career, especially being a heel, is giving the rub to that guy that is really just going to explode and be that star. And that's what I see in Angelico, because I think Havoc doesn't really need it. Pentagon is amazing right now. I think he's setting the world on fire. Phoenix the same way. I think Angelico's kind of in that sweet spot where, yeah, he really is over, but I think he needs that one big win to kind of push him over the edge. That's where Mundo comes in. I would have Angelico beat him at Ultima Lucha. Maybe they continue their feud a little bit beyond that, but we're keeping this in the confines of season 2. I think it would just be a great moment for Angelico as a single star that gets him to be known for more than just the crossbody, is kind of
Right.
my idea.
And the ICBM dropkick, of course.
Eggs and the ICBM dropkick. And see, like that, I would come back to that material in the feud, just being like Mundo saying, you're doing all this. I did the same. It got me nothing but hurt, and just close but no cigar. And you think you're going to be different? You think you're better than me? And of course, Angelico's going to say, well, of course I do. And that's just the whole dynamic. I want there to be an envy that Mundo exudes, which I think could be interesting to explore, because his whole character has been about this flamboyance and this arrogance.
Right.
That when he sees somebody coming up the way he came up, but surpassing him, I think that'd be a very interesting element to explore. So that's my story, which admittedly I did need to hack some out, because you think, well, how are Angelico and Mundo going to come together? That's how I would do it, and that's my plan for Mundo Season 2, is just to get Angelico over. That's the big project.
Right. Yeah, I like that. My one question for you, though, John, what is your end game? What do you see happening at Ultima Lucha 2 for Johnny Mundo, or do you not even have him in it?
Well, no. That's what I'm saying. Like, the big blow-off match would be Angelico versus Johnny Mundo at Ultima Lucha 2, where Angelico goes over. Because I think it would be a big win, considering that Mundo beat Patron at Ultima Lucha last season.
So then
And then,
what's Mundo doing for the rest of the season?
well, let's see. Well, like I said before that, I kind of liked your idea a little bit of him, like, maybe he faces Phoenix at one point for Gift of the Gods, comes up short. Maybe he just gets random victories over guys like Havoc and whoever. Maybe he even gets a win over Prince Puma after he loses his rematch by grabbing the tights or something, real heelish move. Angelico at the same time, I think he would be racking up wins, and even if he would lose, he would always look spectacular doing it, always being that highlight reel. And then those two just kind of meet in the middle, and they have their date at Ultima Lucha. So,
Okay, I dig
yeah.
that.
Yeah.
So you think that just that singles match is going to be on Ultima Lucha?
Yeah, yeah. Honestly, if I know Lucha Underground, they may want to do something actually more in line of what you're thinking with Mundo, getting him in Gift of the Gods, getting him as that fixture in the title picture. And I love Mundo to death, and obviously I wouldn't protest it, but I think the bigger investment we can make with him is making another guy that
Right.
I feel like can be more organic, because Mundo is always going to have that credibility. He is established. He's been doing this 10 years. Angelico, I feel like, can be an organic Lucha Underground star, because this is really where he's gaining his exposure, and we need to take advantage of that. So as much as I love Mundo, and obviously, like, again, I want him to be world champion and do the main event, if we're looking at this seriously and how can we maximize the benefit of having this guy on our roster, it's to give the other guys that we want to make our own organic talents that rub. So that's my whole game plan with Mundo.
Nice. Okay, I dig that, man. I do think that I don't know. I kind of feel like, even though I love the idea of him and Angelico having a feud that ends with Angelico going over, I do feel like he should probably have something more than that for Ultima Lucha. Because, I mean, you look at every single match on Ultima Lucha 1, I don't think there was one that wasn't multi-man or have some kind of stipulation on it. So just a
Right.
singles match between Mundo and Angelico, I highly doubt that would happen.
I think the most I would go, just to kind of spice it up a little bit, because again the whole point is to elevate Angelico. Maybe a ladder match with a contract hanging above the ring. Winner gets a future shot at the world title. Maybe on the very first episode of season 3 they could make it so Gift of the Gods doesn't conflict with it. So then you already know what that guy is going to do at the beginning of season 3. But that would probably be the most I could do, or just something to that effect, just to
Yeah.
kind of sweeten the pot and give something for both guys rather than just this personal animosity, which I would still want to be there. But then I think it really makes the win for Angelico a huge deal, because it's like, holy crap, he's beaten Johnny Mundo and he's looking at a world title shot, presumably in my mind against Phoenix, because I do think he'll be world champion either at Ultima Lucha 2 or before that.
Let me toss a
But
question out there, John. Do you think Johnny Mundo is going to have a world title shot against Mil Muertes in season 2 at all?
I don't think so, man. I
You don't
don't
think
see
he's going
it.
to get a single one, even though he beat Alberto El Patron at Ultima Lucha in season 1? You don't think Johnny Mundo is going to make it back to the world title picture?
As much as I want to say yes, I've got to be realistic. I think he'll try and get back to it through Phoenix, but I think Phoenix will stuff the attempt. And then I think that'll be the most we see of it before Mundo goes on to something else.
Yeah,
And
I
it
don't
kills
know.
me to say that. But
No, I think he'll have. I don't. I think it'd be against Mil, because I don't necessarily foresee Mil Muertes losing the title during season 2. Maybe at the end, and even that I kind of doubt. But I just don't feel like we're gonna go an entire season, probably ever, without Johnny Mundo getting a world title shot.
well, that's actually kind of a comforting thought if you're right, because then
Well,
I
I
can
mean, if you think
yeah.
about it, he had, didn't he? I know he had at least 2. He might have even had 3 world title shots in season 1,
He had, because he was a part of Aztec Warfare,
right?
and then he had All Night Long with Puma.
That's 2.
What was, because I feel like he may have had a third shot at the time, but no, I think it was actually only 2. But even
No,
still,
but he had multiple number 1 contender matches.
that's true.
The
Yeah,
match with El
yeah.
Patron, the match with Cage. I feel like he had a match with Cuerno at one point that was for the number 1 contendership. He had so many opportunities, and he ended up having 2 separate matches that if he would have won, he would have won the Lucha Underground title. So I do think that he's going to get at least one more of those opportunities in season 2 against possibly Mill, most likely Mill, but I don't necessarily know. That would be an interesting match too, because I feel like the only time we really got to see that was when it was him and Puma taking on Mill to finish out Aztec Warfare.
And it would continue to be intriguing because they're both Rudos, but in very different ways. Like
Yeah.
Mill is just like, I'm gonna run through you like a truck,
Whereas
and
Mundo is
Mundo's
more
just like,
flashy.
exactly.
Yeah. So I think they could put on a very interesting match, if not a great match. And yeah, I'm definitely very interested to see what Mundo does in season 2. I would say if I had to make like a top 5 list of who the top 5 luchadors are that I am most interested in seeing for season 2, he would probably either make the list or just barely miss it, and probably make a top 10 for sure.
Right, right.
So yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to seeing what he does. But that being said, ladies and gentlemen, it's been an awesome episode. We freaking love Johnny Mundo. I love Johnny Mundo, but I don't have anywhere close to the unbridled amount of love for him that John does.
Can we just both agree we love Johnny Mundo even more now, though, since he sent Al Patron on the way out?
Yeah, and
Like,
it's funny you say that, because I was just about, you bringing it full circle, man. I was just about to say episode 8 was going to be about Alberto El Patron, but now we know that he's not going to be on season 2 because he sold out and went to WWE.
yeah, what a scumbag.
So, and the crazy thing is, John, at this point, knowing the number that they threw at him to try and bring him back, I don't even blame him. I blame them for being dumb enough to think he's worth that.
Exactly.
So, because of that, we would have done El Patron, and then we would have used El Patron to transition to Tejano. So rather than using El Patron, we're just going to cut that bridge out and go straight from Mundo to Tejano.
Sounds great. Yeah, Tejano's going to be a more interesting case because there are definitely some things I have in mind for him. So be sure to tune in for that, guys.
Yeah, and you've got to realize, too, The last time we saw him, he was getting beat down by the Crew and Blue Demon Jr., so there's a very distinct possibility he goes after that entire faction.
Yeah, definitely. I completely agree
Factional
there.
warfare, people!
Yeah!
We'll see you all for episode 8. And before then, if you're on the channel for everything and not just Lucha stuff, we'll see you for our NXT review tomorrow night. It's going to be fun. Tejano, baby!